The best is yet to come, and babe, won't it be fine?
You think you've seen the sun, but you ain't seen it shine.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Ask the Treksperts. I'm Captain Logan.
I'm Sarah.
In the original series, we had a triad of three main characters.
Yes.
We had Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and most of the stories were about them specifically. Now, we had other main characters that were in most of the episodes. The bridge crew and stuff, yeah. And some of them got their own episodes per se. Of course, then you had characters like Sulu, where his best moment was running around with a sword when he wasn't even quite himself, and that was like everyone's favorite moment about him.
That was his only moment.
Yeah. So, it was not an ensemble cast.
Right.
It was a show about a triad. And then later on, it became more of a space opera in the sense that the shows were more about an ensemble cast. So Next Generation had a whole lot of Picard episodes. He was the main character, but then every other character that was in the bridge crew had their own episodes also.
Yeah, and even Deanna Troi got her own episodes.
Quite a few of them.
Yeah.
Wesley Crusher. You know, these characters got quite a few episodes. So today, we're going to talk about triads versus ensemble cast.
Right.
And we're going to start by talking about Enterprise.
It's the best one.
Okay, so Enterprise
Yes.
had attempted the triad formula again.
They did. And only this time it was not, Captain, Doctor, First Officer. It was Captain, First Officer, Engineer. It was Captain Archer, T'Pol, and Trip. And it just didn't quite work out.
And what were the problems with it?
Well, I think a major problem was that one of them was a girl. And that female officer happened to be the love interest at some point during the series to both Trip and to Archer. And, I mean, the thing with Archer, they kind of played with first season.
Yeah, they hinted at it.
It
wasn't even
never
really played with. Yeah, it was hinted at. It was obvious that they wanted to do that.
Yeah.
That they were thinking about
I'm glad they didn't.
And then they decided against it. But the Trip thing became one of the big through lines of the series.
And I just think the triad thing doesn't work quite so well when there's
a romance in the middle of it.
I don't know. That just turns me off.
Luckily, it wasn't a love triangle. Luckily, we didn't have a love triangle through a triad.
Can you imagine a Star Trek love triangle with the captain being one of the?
I agree with you that one of the problems was that T'Pol was in that triad and that she was a female with two guys. More problematic was the fact that she was the sex symbol on the show.
Yeah.
7 of 9 wasn't part of a triad. She was one of the she was added
ensemble.
One of the ensemble, and so she got a lot of episodes. And a lot of people complained that she got too many episodes. That once they added her to the cast of Voyager, she became kind of the show. And that's a fair criticism of it. Some of us like her, some of us hate her. There's a big divide, and we brought her up more times than maybe we even should have on this show even. But I bring her up because that's kind of where the idea for T'Pol had to have come from.
Yeah.
Straight down to the right down to the skin tight outfits, right?
Yeah. Well, and I guess the idea was, well, 7 of 9 saved Voyager after they brought her in 4th season, so surely we should be able to save Enterprise from the beginning by starting with.
Or more, let's not break it if it's. I mean, let's not fix it if it's not broken, right? This is a formula that worked well for one show, so let's introduce it at the beginning of this new show. Some people have even criticized Enterprise as being just more episodes of Voyager, but in the past.
Yeah. Well, it certainly feels that way.
And it has that problem sometimes. Why did it work in TOS? No one complained. Few people complain that Scotty and Sulu and Uhura don't get enough screen time in TOS. Why is that?
Well, I think part of it is simply that the triangle worked so well, and even though it was a triangle show, it was mostly about Kirk. Every single episode has Kirk, having a major role in it. I mean,
and having to deal with some sort of a crisis.
Right, and then he uses his two best friends, Spock and McCoy,
to help him make
to
decisions.
help him solve the problem.
Right.
And you'll have some episodes that are more about Spock, or some episodes that are more about McCoy, but Kirk is always a major player in each of these. And I think that helped. I mean, when you go to Enterprise, not every story is about Archer.
True.
And
True.
you really don't want them to be, because he's not as strong enough. I think part of the problem is that none of the characters in Enterprise became strong enough characters. You didn't have your... I mean, what would you use to describe the characters of Archer, T'Pol, and Trip? I mean, you would have to almost describe them as, okay, the southern guy, the sexy Vulcan, and the uncertain captain.
Right.
I mean, as opposed to TOS, where you actually have character attributes that you can give to Kirk and Spock and McCoy, as opposed to just...
And they all complement each other.
They do.
It isn't that your characters have to all get along all the time. And of course, one of the staples of TOS was that McCoy and Spock fought a lot.
Yeah.
You know, but at the same time, these were people who always respected each other. These were people who went to each other in times of need, even when they didn't want to. And there were times when, and honestly, that was an issue with Spock. You know, there were episodes where Spock really needed to go to McCoy or Kirk for something, and he wouldn't. He refused. He wanted to go it alone. And the lesson to learn was, I can't go it alone.
Right.
We got that in some places. We got that in things like, you know, Journey to Babel comes to mind, where, you know, Spock, you can't do this on your own. You need to leave the bridge and let someone help you out because you have to go save your dad, and stuff like that.
And those just made for very strong stories, strong and compelling.
Right, and sometimes they tried to force drama out of Enterprise.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and a lot of times nothing actually ended up happening on Enterprise, especially first and second season.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, nothing is really at stake, and we're not really doing anything big, we're just, you know, there's a planet and it has mold on it.
And I find it interesting that people do complain a lot about some of the characters in Enterprise not getting enough screen time, but you don't hear as much of those complaints in TOS, because sometimes I feel like some of the ensemble characters in Enterprise that weren't part of that triad were more interesting than anybody in the triad.
Yeah.
Phlox was really interesting. Hoshi could have been done interesting, but they rarely did anything with her. Reed could have been really cool, and
Mayweather was in space.
And Mayweather loved being in space, but then the last season, it was almost as if they realized this was a problem and they started trying to give these characters backstories, but too late for anybody to care.
Way too late. I think what happened was that they started with a stronger skeleton for some of the more background characters.
Which I think is a lesson they learned from Voyager. Yeah. Where the first season of Voyager, a lot of the criticism in that show was these people aren't interesting. And so then they came up with some characters in Enterprise that were interesting, but they didn't tell any stories about them.
Yeah. I mean, Hoshi Sato, I know that she's one of your favorites in Enterprise.
She is. And
they do almost nothing with her, but she is a rather fascinating character, but she's only two-dimensional because we don't know anything about her.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, once they started trying to give her character development, it seemed kind of forced.
Whereas the ones they focused on, they really had a hard time doing anything with because they just weren't interesting to begin with.
So, would you say that the reason the ensemble cast formula works in Next Generation, I mean, I would say that actually works. Would you say that the reason it works is because the characters are interesting enough from the get-go, or is it because they've got a strong enough leader that the other ones can fall behind? I mean, what would you... I
think initially with Next Gen, it was because they had a strong enough leader to fall behind. Because...
Although I don't like Picard in first and second season all that much. He's kind of a crotchety old man.
Well, pick another character you prefer.
Over Picard in the first couple seasons?
In the first couple seasons.
By second season, they were already starting to do interesting enough things with Data that he was a kind of a cool character. They were also trying to do some stuff with Worf, although he still was a little bit silly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see what you're saying. Certainly, that's the strongest acting going on there.
Yeah. And so, well, I mean, you at least have a focal point to watch.
Yeah.
And then the other characters, I mean, they fumbled around the first two seasons. And then they finally got stronger, and the ensemble got stronger.
And then I say the ensemble cast thing works well in DS9 simply because it's an ongoing story, so you can tell all these individual people's stories because you have enough time. You're not worrying so much about individual stories, you're telling them big.
And the characters are more well-rounded in general. Those characters are more well-rounded than any other characters in any other series.
Well, we're all out of time.
Okay.
But if you have anything you'd like to say on this particular topic, please leave us a comment below. Also, if you have other ideas for topics we might do in the future and episodes we might review, because we are planning on doing more of those, leave those in the comments as well. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Sarah.
And we'll see you next time.
The best is yet to come.
The best